Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how the exposure system works on Nikon FM3A. Alright, so first, you actually need to decide what ISO to shoot on. So there's a DX mode. If your film is a DX film, which has a DX code, then you can use DX mode, which will adjust your ISO automatically to box speed. But of course, if the film does not have a DX code, then you need to adjust your own ISO. So for instance, I'm using a 400 ISO film, so the exposure will be according to 400 ISO. Alright, so when you look through the viewfinder, you can see there's a needle on the left side. Let me move the camera a bit so you can see this more clearly. So you can see the needle on the left side. So needle indicates the correct exposure in this scene, and the correct, how to say, okay, you see the needle is, it dropped down just now, right? So you need to reactivate it back. So what you do is that you half press this shutter, then you will reactivate it back. I can show you. So I'm going to press it right now. See, it jumps right out. So the light meter is turned on by this mechanism as well as by this mechanism. You need to unlock it, then you need to do the half shutter. Alright, because if it is locked, you cannot fire. So you need to unlock it, then half shutter to activate the needle. Alright. So on A mode, your camera will actually automatically adjust the shutter speed to give you the correct exposure, right? But of course, on manual mode, you can look through the viewfinder. You can see the shutter speed. The correct, how to say, the needle will indicate the correct shutter speed to expose the film in a normal way, in a normal exposure value. So to get the correct exposure in this scene, you need to match the needle with your manual aperture needle. So when both needles are matched, then you are exposing the scene according to what the meter is reading now to get a normal exposure. But of course, you can still make decision to actually shoot lower or higher than the recommended exposure value for this scene. So yeah, that's how you can make a conscious decision on what exposure to shoot with for this scene. So the special thing about this camera is that when you set this to A, the camera will actually fire and choose the shutter speed for you to expose this scene at a normal value. But what's special about this camera is that there's an exposure compensation feature here. Alright, so if for example your film is 6400 ISO, there's an interesting manual or analog limitation where you cannot actually underexpose it further by 2 stops when you use the compensation. You cannot go down, but you can still go up. See, interesting. And if you set this to 3002, you cannot underexpose it 2 stops, right? But you can underexpose it by 1 stop. See, it's interesting. However, if you set this to the lowest ISO, which is 12, you can still move around. How to say? This dial will still work to over and underexpose it by 2 stops, but it will not give you the proper reading for the expected under overexposure. I mean for the expected overexposure. So you keep this in mind if you actually use a 12 ISO or 6400 ISO film. But if you use the usual film, which is 200, 400, in 800, so that one I think we don't need to worry about that. So now I'm going to set this back to 400 ISO. So with this setting, let's say for example I want to overexpose by 2 stops, right? You can see here. Alright, so when I set this to A mode, actually any mode also can, but the important thing is I can see the needle on the left. So to correctly expose this tin by 2 stops, you need to shoot at 15 ISO. So if you go to manual mode, then you need to put 15 if you want to expose it, overexpose it by 2 stops. But if you change it back to normal, alright, so this is a normal exposure, 0. So to expose this scene at the normal level, it will be 125 shutter speed. And if you want to underexpose it by 2 stops, the shutter speed will be higher. See? Okay, so you can see that there's an LED light there with a plus minus sign. That indicates that the exposure compensation is actually activated. So that's to remind you that the exposure values you see now is compensated. It's not a normal exposure value. So the light will go off if you expose it according to a normal value. So there's no compensation at all, plus or minus. Let me focus this. Right, so with this, you will not see the warning light. So yeah, so when it's properly at 0, you will not see the warning light. So see, there's no light now. Alright. So what's special and what is so advanced about this Nikon FM3A is that it has this AE lock function here. So this AE lock function is specially designed to be used with the aperture priority mode here. So what it does is that it will lock the exposure based on a specific area of the scene. So I'm going to show this function to you, but I think this scene is not suitable to demonstrate this feature because usually it will be in a scene where there's a big contrast between the light and dark areas where they use this. So I'm just going to demonstrate to you how it works. So I'm going to show it to you. Okay, I'm going to focus this. Right, so you can see now the shutter needle on the left. So it shows a specific value. So let's say for example I put my hand to cover this. You can see that the needle goes down because there's less light going into the camera, and so there's a need for lower shutter speed to actually get a proper exposure. So this shows that the meter reacts to the amount of light that's going into the camera. So what I'm going to show you is when I press this button, it will actually lock down the setting. So I'm going to show this to you. Okay, better. So we're gonna, okay, see it goes down. See it goes down and goes up based on how much light is going in, right? So I'm gonna, okay, now lock and let go. You can see the needle is frozen in place based on the darker scene just now with my hand covering the lens. So now I'm holding this, and while holding this and I fire, the scene will actually be exposed based on that specific area that I was targeting just now with the A lock. But of course I can also choose not to fire the shutter based on the scene just now. So if I do not want to fire, I can just let go of this button. So you can see what happens when I let go of the button. But, you know, so I'm going to count at the count of 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. See, when I actually let go of the button, the exposure requirement goes back to the normal level. So this is what the A lock does, is that when you point your camera at a specific area of the scene, let's say it's a darker region or lighter region, it actually locks down that exposure setting, and you can recompose the scene. Then you lock down the setting, then recompose, so the scene will be exposed based on a specific region in that scene. So it has its uses and functions that you may encounter in the field. So there you go. This is how exposure works on this actually very advanced film camera. So yeah, if you find this video helpful, please like, subscribe and share, and thank you so much for joining by. See you guys next time. Bye, God bless.